Good evening, good evening, good evening. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Erudition Network live interactive Black history and knowledge session. Sorry about the little bit of delay. I think I should probably just trying to change this to just 10 minutes after, because we run in these difficulties, and that way we know that people are here and people are able to get on. But here's the thing too. Sometimes folks come on here a little bit later. So, it's a thing where sometimes, it happens that way. But regardless, I'm happy that for any of you who come and join us with the live interactive session, I was so happy with the way that the session went last week. We had one of our newer subscribers asked a question toward the end of one of our episodes, and we took the time to do a episode where we actually answered the question. And this question was on Pan-Africanism, talking about our history and parts of our history that a lot of us aren't very well educated in. Not saying that we don't know anything about it, but the fact is, it's not really shared. But I do think, tell you something good, that I'm here. That's a good thing. That's always a good thing. No, not gonna do all that. This is a PG history session. And that is my wife, who actually hosts a show on Mondays, where she tries to deal with health issues, definitely, particularly how we deal with mental health and how we deal with coping in this world. While we have people hopefully logging on and trying to see what we'll talk about, because here's the thing. This is one of those weeks where I was like, man, we had such a good session. Yeah, last week. And I was like, I don't know really what we should talk about. There are some definite things that are going on currently that have historical ties that I guess we could explore tonight. And then there's the other issue of the 4th of July just passed. And this seems to be, over the last couple of years, the 4th of July seems to be contentious. I spent some of my 4th of July talking to different people in different venues and online about African Americans and their relationship to the 4th of July. So it's, hey, what's up, Daenerys? Hey, good to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you. I appreciate every one of you all who join us and bring your questions and your thoughts to this program. It is an interactive program. I try to make it an interactive program to answer questions and things of that sort. So we're 4 minutes into it, and let's kind of try to find out what we want to talk about tonight. What are the things that let's start with this whole 4th of July that just passed. Every year, I'm going to cut my phone down, because when my phone was dead, and when it comes on, it goes crazy. I get so many messages from so many people on so many different things. All right. But let's talk about this. They've seen the t-shirt. She's talking about the t-shirt. So we have t-shirts that we have had made. I'll try to set up my chair. My chair is kind of low, and as I have back issues, I try. All right, there's your t-shirt, Tina. So we have Erudition Network t-shirts that we've had made, and we're testing out that my cousin, who has a business, actually created for us, and we will be getting more of those made so that we can start trying to get other folks to get out here and get those shirts and promote the channel. But getting back to what I was saying, every year around the 4th of July, I get a lot of people who blitzkrieg me with the idea of, as an African American, Black history, why should I celebrate the 4th of July? as a military veteran, I'm going to tell you that I will always celebrate the 4th of July because of the men and women who sacrificed throughout the centuries before and since the founding of this country. I try to give them the credit for what a lot of our brothers and sisters did during the American Revolution that is often passed up and ignored. And one of the things that I tried to do over this last holiday was I went in and I created I took a picture and I went through and I analyzed I won't say all, that would be wrong. I analyzed at least about 100 men and women who had participated in the revolution and how this country was created. And I did that because what I honestly wanted to do is I wanted to stop people from saying to themselves that there is no purpose for Blacks to enjoy the 4th of July. All right, here it is right here. And when you look at this particular slide that I created, there is so much history on this slide. There is so much history on this slide. There are so many men who gave this is all Revolutionary War period. Men who put their lives on the line so that, we could enjoy freedom. And so every year, yes, Christmas Attucks is an example clearly, and he's listed in here. And Generis, it's really good that you bring that up because I'm gonna tag on that. This is why. Hey, Sean Anthony, I saw you pop in there. I want to talk about that. Let's talk about that. We have people right now in this country who we argue currently do Black Lives Matter, right? We argue currently the idea of the importance of Black life. And a lot of us are not steeped in our history enough to know that when we talk about the 4th of July, before the 4th of July, right? Well, before that, that was the 5th of March, 1770. And a lot of people don't understand what the 5th of March, 1770 was. Does anybody out there, because I want this to be interactive, does anybody remember what happened on March 5th, 1770? That was the lead up. And Janarius gave us Christmas Attucks, which you can learn about in your school books. But can anybody else out there tell me Christmas Attucks was part of it? What happened 5th of March, 1770? I'll give you a couple of moments. I won't stare at the screen, but I'll give you a couple of moments to think about that. Oh, anybody that's out there, we got about 5 or 6 people on here. All right, I'll give you 30 more seconds. You can feel free to Google it. Google. I know that's what we do nowadays. Jerry said, I think the Tea Party. Teddy said, I'm drawing a blank. What happened on March 5th, 1770 was the Boston Massacre. Now, you are taught about the Boston Massacre in your school books. I know because I went to school too. And here's the thing about the Boston Massacre that you may not be taught. Crispus Attucks was a Black man. He was actually half Indian and black, right? Supposedly. But we know that he was a mulatto black man. And we know that that Attucks was a mulatto black man because his owner in 1750, a William Brown at Farmington, Massachusetts, he advertised 3 times in 1750. He was trying to get rid of this cantankerous, fighting mulatto fellow named Crispus Attucks. He called him Crispus in his advertisement. And he said he was large. Crispus Attucks was 6 feet, 6 feet 3 inches, 6 feet 2 inches, something around there. He had short curly hair, and he was very muscular. And this made him very threatening. And his owner at the time was afraid of him and wanted to basically sell him. Well, eventually, Crispus escaped slavery. He ran away. And he found work. He stayed in Boston. And upon finding freedom, he wanted to. He felt that the American Revolution. He felt that the way that things were going, he really was arguing more for his workers' rights. But he also felt that fighting against the British would allow him, right, and his fellow brethren to possibly be free. And so on the 5th of March, during the Boston Massacre, they charged British soldiers, and the rest is history. They were shot. But here's the thing that ties us into today. When Crispus Attucks was shot, John Adams, who was later president, was the attorney that was assigned to defend the British soldiers. And John Adams, and I paraphrase, said that Crispus Attucks was a large black man. His very presence was threatening. Sound familiar? He was such a large black man that his very presence was threatening enough and required murderous acts. That is a good point. England eventually wanted to cancel slavery. And there's a reason historically for that. Slavery had made America a very wealthy country. It had made the Americas, South and North America, down to Haiti, down to what was known as Hispaniola. But they were all embedded in slavery. They were all embedded in slavery. We forget that the Essential del Negro, which was basically the charter that Spain had, that it sold to different countries that allowed them to transport slaves from the old world to the new world. And England had put a lot of money into that. So from 1600 all the way to the 1700s, it wasn't very uncommon, right, for the English. The English saw it as a money marketing thing. But when you have so many blacks being sent over to the Americas, and they are the engine, the workhorse. They are the thing that creates and drives America. The way to get around that, the way to stop that, is to say, well, we no longer think that slavery is a good thing. It's a matter of expediency, financial expediency, and not moral function at all. And unfortunately, even here in America, when slavery was abolished, it was not necessarily a moral thing, but more of an expedience thing during the Civil War, because if we could have slaves run away from the Southern masters, that engine of American activity could be taken away. So those are really good points. I really do like what you guys are saying tonight. Yes, because back then you didn't have to have a need for taxes yet. England had a need for taxes. And that's why you all mentioned earlier the Boston Tea Party and the rebellion of no taxation without representation. England couldn't compete with the settlers with slaves putting together the raw goods. Yes, and there's another thing too that we have to add in there too, Generis. We have to also understand that the blacks who were bought over, we're always taught as if these were feral people with no intellect, no intelligence, no understanding, and that these people were just bought over here as like animals, like dogs. And the reality of it is they came from tribes who were metal workers. They came from tribes who understood some form of writing, some form of communication. They understood how to grow crops. They understood how to cure and take care of meats, how to salt meats, how to preserve meats. And what they bought, just like the American, the indigenous people over here, what they bought to the white slave owners and the Europeans was understanding that they themselves did not have. It is not me telling you that blacks are greater and better than whites. What I am saying is that history by documentation tells us that blacks sat around. Here's the thing. I always tell people this. If you were a slave or a person enslaved, that's the new term they like to use. If you were a person who was enslaved and your job at the risk of abuse or death was to keep your master, whatever, pleased, a lot of them learned techniques from where they were from. They were passed down. These are knowledgeable people. These weren't just anybody. And they passed that knowledge down. So how to refrigerate meat, how to bury certain things to keep it fresh. And the reason why, you know that this is a fact, because history shows us that when slaves were being freed, whites got mad. And they said they were losing their wealth, not just because of ownership. They were losing skilled workers who knew how to cultivate, keep land, animals, and everything. And they were losing these people to be their own autonomous, sovereign people. Yeah, you're right. The skilled trades made them vital. Metal workers, Africans from a lot of them were skilled. They were skilled in metalworking before they were ever taken into slavery. History shows that. A couple of weeks ago, I talked to you all about the what they call them Seminoles. I don't call them Seminoles. But I talked to you about the tribes of blacks, the blacks who fled during the 16, 17, and 1800s, who ran away, right? And became the Maroons. Indigenous people, in line with indigenous people, basically their own indigenous tribe, coming from being enslaved in America and running away and learning how to read the land and working with the indigenous people. And here's the thing that always gets me when it comes down to history. History suggests to us that Africans were visiting the Americas long before the Europeans. I told you all in another program, we talked about the winds, right? And how we could take the Africans and how those same winds could take sailing ships later on, centuries later. And Europeans acted as if they created these. I'll give you an example. I was watching something with my son the other day, and the woman was saying that she wanted to leave Boston and go to California because of the gold rush. And the quickest way to get from Boston to California was to sail all the way around. See if I can show you here, if it will show it. If you see the Americas, I got a bigger globe. What am I doing? I don't know if I can stretch it though. But if you look at the Americas, right? If you look at, don't move my mic, and you'll see the best way for them to get around was to sail all the way around and come all the way back in order to get to California. Here's the thing. That was the quickest way because they hadn't gone they didn't trust going across America. We had not built the railroads yet. That was the purpose of building the transcontinental railroads. That was the biggest purpose. But until then, before the Civil War, that was the quickest way. Africans had sailed and come across a very short way, because that's the way the winds went, right over into Brazil, over into the Bahamas, into the islands. We know this. History has shown us this. And then it wasn't hard to make your way in Florida. When we say that in 1528, right, that there were blacks and Spanish who rebelled and left European life in Florida to ingratiate themselves with the natives, who were already dark of skin, and accepting. This is the history that is not passed to us. This is the things that we don't know. So Africans were already in the Americas. They were already ingratiated with the indigenous people. We look at the Common people and we watch how they came across and went in to Texas and areas like that. And we have spearheads that suggest African background and descent. But we act as if we don't know it. Pangea is a part of it. Pangea left people in different areas. The end of Pangea. We know that history and geology, we know that these things happen. But more important than that, if I left you myths and stories about family that are now separated because of a catastrophe, a volcanic explosion, a landmass, but I know that there are people who are out there somewhere because it's passed down in story. And what I used to tell people that, and they would be like, you're just making it up. That's a stretch. That's not really history. But here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. And I see what you're saying, Janaris. Ice Age, the Bering Strait crossing. They told us the Bering Strait crossing for years. But let's understand the duplicity, the ignorance that they were trying to perpetuate on us with the Bering Strait crossing. And I will do that again by showing this map. Y'all got me pulling out this is a gift from my wife. If you look up by the Sea of Okhotsk, let's see if I can unplug this, because this is a plug. There you go. A plugged in thing. Sorry. Maybe a little ghetto, but I want to bring it closer. All right. If you go and you look at the Bering, up here, right? And we know that Russia has the Bering Sea. And we see that we have Alaska, we have all of this, right? That showcases the Berings and comes into the Americas. And the belief was that people left across and got over here, right? And that is what made the indigenous people. That's what got them here. That's what we're told, right? Remember what I just told you a little bit ago. I love what you guys are bringing out here tonight. I love it. To keep it up. Here's the thing. We just said earlier that in the late 1700s, early 1800s, people had to sail all the way around and get to the other part of the Americas, right? So we said. People, we know this from archaeology. People follow coastlines when they travel. I'll say that again. People follow coastlines when they travel. Let's zoom back over to Africa. Large continent, right? Huge continent. And Africa has all of this coastline. We know from the Bible, we know from everything, right, that has been put out in different parts of history of this area, that Africans left. They left and they spread out. We know this to be a fact. It's not made up. History, archaeology, all of that shows us that that is what happened. They stayed around coastlines. We know that Hanno, right, an African Phoenician, sailed around Africa well before Prince Henry the Navigator, well before any European travel here. They were sailing around. We know that because in the Bible, Solomon says that one of the Phoenician kings helped to build the temple, and that he allowed the Israelites to travel with them on their ships. If we look at Ethiopia and Somalia, we know that the Ethiopians and Somalians, right? You know, because of the Queen of Sheba knew and wanted to know who Solomon was. Who was this man that was sending people around to get these things for a temple? Who was this great ruler? All of this was connected. This was culturally connected. When you look at Jeddah and Port Sudan, right? These are two of the biggest and busiest ports in the history of the world, of the early world. Saudi Arabia and the Sudan. Spice routes, tie in from India. We know all of that. That much they tell us. What they don't tell us, they will tell us everything we need to know about going this way into Asia. It's Australia. It's India. It's to what they now call the Middle East. But they will never give us the facts that Africans traveled to the Americas before the European. And why is that? Why do they teach us let's get back to that, the Bering Strait and the Asiatic man? Why do they teach our kids this? Because as long as life came from anywhere that could have traveled from Europe to the Americas, that gives them stake and the ability to say, we put life over here. And it took the better part of 1,000 years for people to finally understand life came out of Africa. There were fights against that study. There were pseudo-archaeologists who damaged information, who hid archaeological finds. There were men who rewrote history. When I tell you that I don't solely subscribe to the idea of the Bering Strait crossing, there's a reason. When I don't spend all of my time focusing on what was going on in the East that I know African culture touched, that I know it did, because I want to be able to suggest to you and tell you how important it is to know that your ancestors populated the world. People of a darker skin, because that's not taught in your schools. And that is Black history. That is the fact. If you consider the fact, right, that the first, right, Africans, some of the earliest human beings were found in Africa. Archaeologists suggest that the first human beings were found about what? 315,000 years ago. Sorry, that's what is suggested. So if we know that, yes, Iraq, I spent a great deal of my life, more than I thought I would, in the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea, in that area. And I spent a lot of my time over there when I got there asking questions. because I have a love for history. Yes, true Black history. We need to teach that. We talk about the Silk. Come on, Teddy. There you go. We talk about the Silk Road. We talk about how all of that worked because we want to push Asians. It's so bad that the Asians do not understand their connection with the African. Let me say that to you again. The Asian doesn't even understand his connection with the African. If the first life was fought in Africa 315,000 years ago, and the Asian can't understand that because he has been taught that no, his people are separate because some man decided to say that he wanted to make it that everybody had a certain cultural or racial identifier. Ain't that way we was taught? They had a cultural or a racial identifier. And so you forget that the first civilizations, you forget where you are. When you understand, right? Well, I hear what you're saying, Janarius, but you got to also understand that the earliest known dates of human immigration out of Africa is probably about two. Let's give it a round number, 215,000 years ago, right? There's evidence to suggest that life started to expand. Could have been before that, but we see heavy evidence around the coasts. That's the key. But then here's the thing. A lot of history is lost. But I don't say it's lost. It's hidden. It's hidden. It's hidden in tales. It's hidden in books. It's hidden in myths. It's hidden to us, but not to others. That's why every couple of years, some archaeologist or some historian comes out and discovers something that no other that the culture that they discovered it about didn't know. But I'm going to show you something tonight. There's a reason why we had the Renaissance. There's a reason why you have men still digging in areas of Egypt, still digging in areas of the Sudan, Ethiopia, right? Still digging in Somalia, still going over and digging in areas of Saudi Arabia. There's a reason. Because, see, here's the thing. They want to know, and they know where the knowledge is. When libraries like the Library of Alexandria and all of these places where they stored knowledge were destroyed, everything's not necessarily destroyed. It is more hidden. That's the word. Hidden. This is why the Piers Rice map had directions for the coasts of America. This is why. They had the coast of America. This is why when I teach about Columbus went. He didn't go straight back to the throne of Castile. Columbus took himself to Portugal and came up with a map, came up with an idea of knowledge, because the Portuguese were the ones who were firstly pushing slavery and transporting slaves, black slaves. And they understood navigation. We give the Portuguese and the Spanish so much credit for their ability to sail and make sail ships. And we forget the fact that they took a lot of that from other cultures. We forget the fact, this is one of the biggest things that is often ignored in history. I'm going to show you this right now. I'll get to that, Teddy. That's a good point. Here's the thing. When you look at here, the Mediterranean, the Med is a very very narrow. It's narrower than they make it look on these maps. I've been in the Med many times. And you can see across both sides. And you have to understand that, yes, the Moors are a part of it, but they weren't the only culture that was ripped off by the Spanish and by the Portuguese and by the Europeans. But they're a part of it. That knowledge that was passed from the East that went to the North. When you look at the Greeks who sailed down to Egypt, short distances, wrote their myths based on Egyptians and African life, Libyans, Algerians. All of these stories that they wrote that we were told to be Greek myth, and we thought they were white people visiting white people. This is what I was taught. These are all the Greek islands. They're talking about the islands of Greece. No, they were talking about Africa. And they went over and they took that knowledge. And then they shared that knowledge. So they knew what was over here because of what they learned from here. A lot of knowledge is not lost. It has been repurposed. It has been taken. It has been given a different heredity. And a lot of us don't even understand it. A couple of weeks ago, I did a lesson on here. And I know sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, I know sometimes some of these lessons can be really deeper than what people want to hear. But I did a lesson when I talked about African math. Right? Not Western civilization math, not the European math. I talked about math that came out of Africa, that came out of what we now call the Middle East. The understanding of how to build, how to create. And that's a whole nother lesson. I'm gonna tell you, Janarius, I've been hesitant to go into the Kemetic thing. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because there are so much things in the water that are incorrect, that are wrong. And I want to do it in a way where I am not insulting those who are questing for knowledge, but that I'm actually giving you resources that are valid and validated, and not just an idea said by somebody. And I want to make sure we do that correctly. I agree. The gist of all of this is the connectivity that is denied us about African life, about Africans, period. That is the connective tissue that a lot of us don't know, has been denied to us, is not taught to us. And now that you have people who have tried to learn these things and they want to teach it, now they're calling it all types of things, critical race theory, everything, all this stuff that is being thrown out here to disenfranchise us or to disillusion us enough to say, I no longer want to learn this. This can't be correct. When in reality, we need to be learning these things. We need to understand these things. My son made a point a minute ago, a little bit ago. He posted something on here talking about explosions. But here's the thing, Teddy. Here's the thing. Before I get into that deeper, here's the thing. A lot of things happen in this world that we haven't been taught about. And there's a reason. When you think about a volcanic eruption, let's look at something just within my lifetime. Mount St. Helens exploded in the early 80s. It was such a catastrophic explosion that it had the power of multiple nuclear bombs. It changed the environment, not only over in America for a while, but all the way over in Asia, and then eventually in different parts all over the world. That was one volcano. Well, you're talking about, Teddy, you're talking about Toba. The Toba volcanic eruption of 76,000 years ago. Toba is important because when Toba exploded, those Africans who were expanding into the pygmies, as we call them, they call them pygmy people. They were expanding along the coastlines in India and Asia. And when that explosion happened, they got cut off. Those people and the people who were over there, those who lived, were cut off. And because they got cut off, we have found, and a lot of people fight the whole Toba eruption theory, as they call it. But we know that it happened. We know that it happened. We know that because of the Toba eruption, we have Australian Aborigines. We have Asians. The thin eyes, the different facial features of the Asians in that area of the world are different from anybody else on the planet. And that is because when that volcano erupted, that supervolcano exploded in Sumatra, it put a plume of ash all over that area. What some could call a nuclear winter, because they're the force of nuclear bombs, and people mutated. Mutation happens in those kinds of things. Scientists and archaeologists and people are still trying to deny it. But as you dig up remains, as you look at the DNA markers, remember a couple of years ago, maybe some of you all remember, they came out and said that the Aborigines, certain parts of people in Australia, that their DNA was so much different from any other people in the world that they had to be basically aligned to be their own separate people. That was not fully the truth. What it shows, they chose to say that because of Toba, because of what it did to the DNA and to the structure of the human beings. That's real history. Go look it up for yourself. Do not just take Eddie Phillips's word. The effects of Toba were immense. And this is why a lot of our Asian brethren, and when I say Asian, let me understand something to you. I'm not just talking about Chinese, Japanese. This is Asia, ladies and gentlemen. When the Huns came through, everybody was a part of that kingdom, that Asiatic kingdom. They interbred with everybody into the Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all of this. The other thing they did is they kept a lot of the European powers out. They scared the hell out of them. So they are very much, as I think I heard saw Generis right earlier, a darker skinned people. That's what they are. Different skin complexions. I saw somebody say Pape. Pape. We need our own social norms, understanding our role to correct understanding of what your culture is. Here's the thing. I went to Pape. I went to go see those people still entombed. And I looked at the Mount Vesuvius, and I looked at that lop of what used to be that volcano. I somewhere have a picture of it. But if you understand, as much as we talk about Mount Vesuvius and the explosion in Pompeii, nothing compares to Toba. Toba changed the complexity of the human race. It morphed Africoids into what they later call Australoids. That's what happened. Those who did not die, their genes were forever ever changed. I enjoy this conversation today. I really do, because I think that we really got to understand some of this history, and we need to talk about it, expound on it. I try to get on here Thursdays to do that, and I love you all's questions, because I think that what it does, it creates a dialogue. It allows us to discuss things effectively, to learn things. As always, what's I've offered here today, I will offer you books, places to go, things to read, analysis to check out, because it's not just about me telling you something. It's for me to allow you to grow. Somebody allowed me to grow because they spurred that thought in me. They made me want to learn. Thank you, bud. That's what we try to do. That's what we try to do. It could have been the wrath of God. And I'm going to tell you something. The people of those times, people always laugh at folks because they say it was God. Here's the thing. What am I to believe? It's not the process. You know, we get so caught up in the modern age about, well, that was the atom split and this happened, and because of a meteoroid hitting the planet, and all of these, we go real technical. But at the heart of it, it's not how God created the action. It's that the action took place. And a lot of times we get lost in the minutia of that. Right? Oh, well, but those are facts. And so people write what they know. Everybody wasn't sitting around with Newtonian knowledge, right? With the thoughts of great thinkers who had centuries, decades to look at other people's passed down words and writing to do deeper analysis and deeper dive, just like we're doing tonight. The slave didn't have all of that. The freeman didn't have all of that. They just understood, I'm going to cry out to God in this field. I'm going to ask him to release me from my bondage. I don't care how Mr. Lincoln or anybody does it. This is how I get released from my bondage. God, you work out the specifics. And I think that that's one of our biggest problems, getting caught up in that minutia. It could have been. It was one of many things that happened on the planet. Remember, for years, they kept telling us there was no floods, that all of that stuff in the Bible was made up. They would look through ancient books and say that was made up. But here's the funny part. This is what always got me. As I started to study, as I started to open myself up to knowledge, I started to see that while they were telling the general public that didn't happen, they were going to these ancient lands and digging up knowledge. I said a little while ago, and I got off track, the Renaissance. They spend so much time in school books teaching our kids about the Renaissance. Right? They spend so much time trying to tell us. They got Renaissance festivals that happen all over the United States. And people flag back to, oh, this was the Renaissance. People live like this. They fantasize about it. But at the heart of the Renaissance was a time where Europeans were going back to look at what had happened in earlier centuries. And they wanted to basically, that's what Renaissance meant. They wanted to revive, right? Go back to those times. Seek the knowledge that they felt that they had lost. Go in and pull up these ancient tomes. Do we not find it funny that during the Renaissance, people like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Botticelli, all these people who we praise for the Renaissance were reading ancient tombs and writings, right? That they were doing that to learn what made these people have this understanding. They were going back and reading what the Greeks and the Romans did. But here's the thing. The Greeks and the Romans took a lot of that from the Africans and the Carthaginians, the Phoenicians. So all of a sudden, after the Renaissance, right, people decide just out of nowhere, let's go sail to the other part of the world. What you think made that an issue? Why do you think people thought there was something there? Because they knew it was there. And this is what we're finding right now. This is what we're starting to understand only right now. I think we have to do better. We have to do better. We have to exchange dialogue and research to have a greater understanding to further ourselves. If we don't exchange knowledge, if we don't tell each other and do what our ancestors did, and even if you passed it down verbally, that's still knowledge sharing. I try very hard every Thursday to come on and do this show. Sometimes, like tonight, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. But I'm going to open myself up to an audience out here, both live and those who watch it later, to ask questions. I have no fear of what it is that I've learned. I was telling my son recently, I spend so much of my time doing research and analysis. So much of my time going in and trying to pull out these things that we should know. But we don't. The lies that have been told to us. The accepted path that a lot of us take. And as time goes on, last week we talked about W.B. Du Bois. Last week we talked about Booker T. Washington. Last week we talked about Marcus Garvey. We talked about Pan-Africanism. We talked about the history just before our lifetime. But if you go read Du Bois's The Negro, his book, The Negro, he goes and he talks about the primitive black. He goes and talks about his analysis that he had at his time. He talks about this because there was knowledge sharing at those times. When we look at Carter G. Woodson, born of those times, when we look at the encyclopedia of black people that was developed during those times, and the desire to learn where we came from, and understanding that a lot of us weren't going to know because slavery had severed the bond of understanding. But here's the thing. DNA allows us to trace our genetic markers across these oceans, these coasts. It also allows scientists to go in and see what the mutations have been. That's the key. Because see, once you know what has happened, then you can no longer hide it. You can't lie about it. Then you have to explain why for the better part of 1,000 years or more, you have lied and suppressed this history and this knowledge. That's where we are right now. When you read books like The Evolution of the Human Population in Arabia, And it goes and it talks about how humans evolved. And you understand that your African DNA has traveled all over this globe. That we're all, by definition, African. You say, I would participate more because I love dealing with history and I share the cash. We have to have an understanding. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We have to have an understanding. You mean the globe, not the glove? What glove do you see? Listen, I try to use PowerPoints and everything else when I can. But again, analysis takes time. And because I don't know a lot of times what's going to be said, what's going to be asked on the live session, my son and me have been really talking quite a while now and trying to focus on how to do more independent lessons and what's the better avenue and venue to do that. I had a person send me a response. I think it was last week. A guy said, I saw your show. You spent a lot of time teaching 5 or 6 people. That's what he said. And I laughed. A couple of weeks before that, I wouldn't have laughed. And my response to him was, yeah, but those 5 or 6 people could teach 100 more people. That's it. That's what I'm having to understand about what it is that I do. You all have so many things that you can watch and participate in via the internet. And I thank you so much for spending time with us on Erudition. And I thank you for, particularly for me, I know my wife does her show, but I really appreciate it because I know that history can be boring. And I try so hard to not make it boring. But a lot of the things we cover on this network, we cover because of you, because of the things that I hear from people. I thank the brothers who came on last week. We had 3 teachers on last week during the live, one of which was asking a lot of questions. And he came back and said on YouTube, he left us a message saying, I was so busy responding that I didn't get a chance to read the things that you put down to go back and research and study some of those things. I'm not here to bloviate to you. I'm not here. We're going to do better with that, Janaris. I know the perception of the globe is jaded. I want to do some things about that. I really want us to do better. I want people to participate and share insight. We may not always agree. Me and that brother did not agree last week on certain issues, but we discussed them. And then I'm going to give you what I know, and you're going to give me what you know. And we're going to come together and say, that's what it is. That's the discussion. But we got to have a discussion first. And that's what we try to do over here. Well, I'm about at my hour, a couple of seconds short of it. But here's the thing. I enjoyed this session. I always enjoy when the interactive session is interactive. Janaris, thank you so much. You said you were at work, but I appreciate you asking the question that you did. I saw Phil in here. I appreciate you, my brother. Teddy, I saw you. Tina, I saw you. Everyone who watches it after, I appreciate you so much for coming, and asking these questions. Leave questions, ladies and gentlemen, even if you watch it later, even if it's just playing in the background and you hear something that strikes you. I'm gonna take 30 more seconds. I'm gonna tell you something. My wife's father watches this. He watches her show too. And he told me something recently and it touched me. He said, I heard something on your show that made me think. He's like, I'm an older man. And you may think sometimes you know things, but he was like, I heard something that you said that made me think in a different way. And I started to listen and look around. That's what this is about. This is not about me bloviating and feeling high on knowledge. This is me trying to push you just a little bit, trying to help those who can help others. Can't do it all by myself. But having said that, I thank you. I'm going to show my t-shirt again because my wife keeps trying to show this. That's our Erudition Network t-shirt. You have to do something about that. Get some shirts out here so people can start trying to, promote the channel. But again, I want to say thank you. Thank you to my son who's in the background. He's been very helpful for me recently running the studio. And we will continue doing what we're doing because I think it's so important. Thank you, Phil. Thanks, man. Thank you all. My brothers, let me tell you something. Subscribe to these Black channels. The Man Up Real Talk Show, Phil and Mike do great insight also. We need to be supporting shows that are out here that can inform us, mentor us, help us to better understand how to make it through what we're dealing with right now. This is going to teach you some history. They're going to talk to you about multitudes of different subjects that affect you right now. We got to do that. We got to do that. Support each other. Subscribe. Go on YouTube. Subscribe. Phil always says, please help us teach. Let's do better as a culture. So much out here that's trying to put us down. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We will be seeing you again next week. My wife will be on Monday with her show, and then I'll be back next Thursday, God willing. But until then, have a great and wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you for joining us.